There were nights in Miami when the air grew thick with broken dreams and whispered hopes. Nights when a 20-year-old woman walked through empty hallways, cleaning up the footprints of lives that seemed to have everything she lacked. Her hands, accustomed to the cold of the mop, trembled not from the work, but from the weight of invisibility. Emily had learned to move like a shadow, to breathe without making a sound, to exist without being seen, until an equation changed everything, until a man with blue eyes and a restless soul saw in her what no one else had known to look for, a mind that shone with the same intensity as the stars that lit up the Miami sky. In the silence of a library, among numbers that did not lie and truths that could not be bought, two worlds collided. And in that collision something was born that no formula could predict, a love that would defy everything established, that would test the belief that the heart, too, has its own mathematics. Because sometimes the most perfect equation is the one you solve with the person you least expect, at the moment you need it most. The rain beat against the windows of St. Patrick's Academy with a fury that seemed to match the dull ache Emily Johnson felt in her chest. Her trembling hands gripped the mop as she cleaned the empty hallways of one of the most prestigious schools in Miami, Florida. At 20, her green eyes shimmered with unshed tears she refused to let fall. Not out of pride, but because she had none left. That morning she had received the letter. The university had rejected her again because she couldn't afford the tuition, despite her perfect grades. "We regret to inform you that there are no more scholarships available," the cold letters on the paper read, which now rested crumpled at the bottom of her worn-out backpack. Her fair skin seemed even paler under the fluorescent lights of the hallway. The navy blue cleaning uniform was too big for her, a hand-me-down from her mother, who had worked in the same place for 15 years before dying in an accident. Emily had taken her place not by choice, but by necessity. Her younger brother, Leo, just 14, depended on her. Well, what do we have here?" A mocking voice sneered from behind her. She turned to find 3 senior students with their impeccable uniforms and cruel smiles. "The new Cinderella. Finished cleaning up our messes yet?" Emily tightened her fists around the mop handle. She knew these boys. She had seen them arrive in their sports cars, spend in a day what she earned in a month, and boast about private universities abroad, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I'm just doing my job," she muttered, trying to dodge them to continue her routine. "Your job?" one of them, a tall boy named Thompson, repeated. "Yeah, I guess everyone has their place in this world. Yours is down here, ours is up there." The words pierced her like daggers. It wasn't the first time she had heard comments like that, but tonight, after the university rejection, after Leo's mounting medical bills, after feeling invisible for so long, something inside her broke. "You're right," she said, her voice barely a whisper that grew into a choked cry. "I have my place, but at least I know what it's like to work for something, not live off what others have built." The boys laughed, but there was something in Emily's green eyes that made them uncomfortable, a dignity they couldn't buy, a strength they didn't understand. When they finally left, Emily was alone in the hallway. Her legs trembled, and she had to lean against the wall. The tears she had held back for years finally began to fall, silent but steady, like the rain that continued to lash the windows. She walked to the library, her secret refuge. During her breaks, when no one was watching, she would escape among the books. There, surrounded by knowledge she craved but that seemed unattainable, she allowed herself to dream. Her father had been a math teacher at a public school in the suburbs of Miami. Before he died when she was 15, he had taught her that numbers didn't lie, that equations had answers, that there was logic in the chaos. That night, as she walked between the shelves, she noticed the door to room 23 was ajar. Curiosity overcame caution. She approached and saw the whiteboard filled with numbers, a complex equation that took up the entire white surface. In the bottom right corner, in red, "Marker," someone had written. "Impossible to solve. Mr. Martinez." Emily froze. She recognized the equation. It was about resource optimization, something she had studied on her own from old library books. She stared at it for long minutes, her green eyes tracing each variable, each symbol, until something clicked in her mind. Without thinking, she picked up a blue marker that was on the desk and began to write. Her hands moved with certainty, as if she had been waiting for this moment her whole life. Line after line, step after step, the solution unfolded before her like a revelation. When she finished, she realized what she had done. Fear washed over her. What if someone found out? What if she got fired? She couldn't afford to lose this job, as humiliating as it sometimes was. She put the marker back exactly where she had found it and left the room, closing the door carefully. But before she left, she allowed herself one last look at the board. For the first time in a long time, there was something beautiful in her life. She had solved something that others considered impossible. The rest of the night passed in a daze. She finished her shift cleaning bathrooms, collecting trash, vacuuming the administrative offices. Each task brought her back to her reality, but something had changed. She had a secret, small, but hers. When she left the academy at 6 in the morning, the fresh Miami air caressed her face. The first rays of sun filtered between the downtown skyscrapers, painting the Art Deco facades gold. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine that she belonged to that world of infinite possibilities. She arrived at her small apartment in the Westwood neighborhood, where Leo was waiting up for her, studying for an exam. His eyes lit up when he saw her. "How was your night, Emmy?" She looked at him. This brother who was more like a son, who depended on her for everything. His features were soft, his eyes the same bright green as hers, but full of hope. Hope that she strived to keep alive every day. "Quiet," she lied, ruffling his dark hair. "Did you have breakfast yet?" "I waited for you." They made a simple breakfast together, scrambled eggs, bacon, and toast they had bought the day before. As they ate, Leo told her about his classes, his teachers, his dreams of becoming an engineer. Emily listened, memorizing every word, every gesture, every smile. It was for him that she got up every morning, for him that she endured the humiliations, for him that she kept going. "Emmy," Leo said, hesitating, "do you think things will ever be different?" The question hit her like a punch to the gut. For a second she saw her reflection in her brother's eyes. Exhaustion, resignation, a deep sadness she tried to hide behind forced smiles. "Yes," she replied, surprised by the firmness in her own voice. "Yes, they will be different." And for the first time in a long time, she almost believed it. After Leo left for school, Emily was alone in the apartment. She went to the small desk they had made from a wooden plank and 2 plastic crates, where she kept the books she had rescued from the academy's trash or bought second-hand at the market. She opened an advanced mathematics book and began to study, as she did every morning before going to sleep. The numbers calmed her. In equations, there was no room for discrimination, for social differences, for broken dreams. There were only problems that had a solution if you knew how to look for it. As her eyes closed from exhaustion, a final image crossed her mind. The whiteboard in room 23, her solution written in blue, perfect and complete. She had solved something impossible. For the first time in her life, she had proven that she was worth more than the world made her believe. She thought that was the worst night of her life, but she had no idea what was yet to come. The rumor spread through St. Patrick's Academy like wildfire. Since 7 in the morning, students and teachers had been crowding in front of room 23, pointing at the whiteboard with expressions of astonishment and perplexity. The equation that had tormented Mr. Martinez for weeks now had an elegant solution, written in blue ink with clear and precise handwriting. "It's impossible," Mr. Martinez muttered, adjusting his glasses as he reviewed each step of the solution for the 5th time that morning. "I solved it myself last night after seeing this. It's perfect, absolutely perfect." Among the crowd that had formed, in the hallway, a tall man observed the scene with a mixture of curiosity and fascination. Ethan Moore had just turned 30 and had taken over as the academy's headmaster just 2 months ago, after his family bought the institution as part of their educational investments. His blue eyes, the color of Miami's winter sky, analyzed every detail with the same precision with which he had managed the family's financial businesses for the last decade. Unlike his siblings, who saw education as just another business, Ethan had left the family empire to try to make a real difference. He had studied pedagogy at Harvard, had a doctorate in educational administration, and carried the constant pressure of proving he could be more than a powerful last name. "Who could it have been?" asked the assistant principal, an older woman named Mrs. Gonzalez, who had worked at the academy since before Ethan was born. "I don't know," he replied, moving closer to the board, "but whoever did this has an exceptional talent. This isn't an equation that any student could solve, not even some teachers." His long fingers traced the lines of the solution in the air, following the flawless logic that had led to the result. There was something in that handwriting, in the meticulous way of approaching the problem, that he found intriguing. It wasn't the hasty writing of a student trying to impress, but the careful work of someone who truly understood the beauty of mathematics. "I'm going to review the security cameras," he announced. "I want to know who it was." The day passed in a blur of speculation and theories. The brightest students at the academy were informally questioned, but none had answers. The math department teachers met during recess to analyze the solution, coming to the unanimous conclusion that it had been crafted by someone with advanced knowledge and a deep understanding of the subject. Meanwhile, Emily arrived home after her night shift, unaware of the commotion she had caused. She had slept soundly, for the first time in weeks, without nightmares about unpaid bills or rejection letters. When she woke up in the afternoon, she found Leo doing homework at the kitchen table. "Did you hear what happened at school today?" her brother asked, his eyes shining with excitement. "Someone solved an equation that's been on the board in room 23 for weeks. The teachers are saying it's like a genius appeared out of nowhere." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "Really?" She tried to sound casual, but her voice broke slightly. "Yeah, everyone's talking about it. The new headmaster is trying to find out who it was. He says this person has an extraordinary talent." Leo paused, looking at his sister with admiration. "I wish I were that smart. Like you." "Like me?" Emily asked, feeling her cheeks flush. "Of course, you're always studying those math books. Dad used to say you had the same gift for numbers as him." Emily fell silent, remembering her father's words years ago. "Numbers don't lie, my girl. When the world is cruel to you, remember that math will always be fair. In an equation, it doesn't matter who you are, only if you're right." That night, as she prepared to go to the academy, Emily felt a strange mix of pride and terror. On one hand, she had proven something she didn't even know she could do. On the other, the fear of being discovered paralyzed her. What would happen if they knew the cleaning lady had dared to touch the sacred whiteboard of a classroom? She arrived at St. Patrick's Academy at 11 at night, as always. The night guard, Fernando, greeted her with his usual kindness. He was an older man who treated her with respect, unlike many other staff members at the academy. "Hey, Emily," he said as she signed in. "Did you hear about room 23? Everyone's been buzzing about that equation." "I heard something," she lied, feeling her pulse quicken. "The new headmaster has been reviewing the cameras all afternoon. It seems he's determined to find who did it." The floor felt unsteady beneath Emily's feet. The cameras. She hadn't thought about the cameras. She felt nauseous and had to lean on the guard's counter. "Are you feeling okay, kid?" Fernando asked with concern. "Yeah, just a little tired," she managed to say, though her mind was racing. Had they seen her entering the room, writing on the board? How much time did she have before they found her out? She began her shift with trembling hands. She cleaned the first-floor bathrooms, vacuumed the administrative offices, but she couldn't concentrate. Every noise made her jump. Every shadow made her think someone was coming to confront her. Around 1 in the morning, while mopping the main hallway, she heard footsteps approaching. She froze, her heart beating so loud she was sure it could be heard throughout the building. "Excuse me," a male voice said from behind her. Emily turned slowly and found herself face to face with a tall man in a dark suit and blue eyes that looked at her with an intensity that made her feel as if he could see right into her soul. She immediately recognized him as the new headmaster. She had seen him from a distance during her first few weeks, but they had never exchanged words. "Good evening," she managed to say, her voice just a whisper. Ethan Moore watched her for a moment that felt like an eternity. He had reviewed the cameras for hours, watching the previous night's footage over and over. He had seen this young woman enter room 23, stand before the board for several minutes, write with care and precision, and then leave as if nothing had happened. What had struck him most was not just that she had solved the equation, but the way she had done it. He had noticed the reverence with which she had picked up the marker, the concentration on her face, the quiet satisfaction upon finishing. It hadn't been an act of rebellion or arrogance, but of pure love for mathematics. "What's your name?" he asked, keeping his tone neutral. "Emily Johnson," she replied, mentally preparing for the worst. "Emily," he repeated, as if tasting the name. "Do you know why I'm here?" She nodded slightly, unable to speak. Her green eyes filled with tears she refused to shed in front of him. "Where did you learn to solve equations at this level?" The question took her by surprise. She had expected shouting, accusations, the threat of immediate dismissal, not a genuine question about her education. "My father was a teacher," she said finally, her voice gaining a little more strength. "He taught me that mathematics was beautiful. I study on my own." Ethan felt something shift in his chest. There was something about the quiet dignity of this young woman, in the way she faced the situation without excuses or lies, that completely disarmed him. "Do you know that this equation had been unsolved for weeks?" "I didn't know when I solved it," Emily admitted. "I just saw that it said it was impossible, and that bothered me. Numbers don't lie. If there's a problem, there has to be a solution." The words struck him like lightning. It was exactly what he believed about mathematics, about life, about everything. For years he had been surrounded by people who saw obstacles where he saw opportunities, who gave up where he saw challenges. "Why do you work here?" he asked, though he thought he knew the answer. "Because I need the money," she replied with brutal honesty. "My younger brother depends on me. This was the only opportunity I had. And college." The question opened Emily's freshest wound. "They rejected me. Again. I don't have the money for tuition." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. Here, before him, was a brilliant mind being wasted by a system that valued a bank account more than talent. It was exactly the kind of injustice he had come to fight when he left the world of finance. "Do you like your job here?" he asked, though the answer was obvious. Emily looked him directly in the eyes for the first time. "It's not about whether I like it. It's about what I have to do." The answer completely disarmed him. He had known hundreds of people who complained about jobs that paid them 10 times what she earned. Here was someone who did what was necessary without self-pity, with a dignity that many executives he knew lacked. "Could you solve other equations like this?" he asked. "Probably," she replied without false modesty. "Numbers have always made sense to me." Ethan nodded slowly. "Emily, would you be willing to meet with me tomorrow? I'd like to talk more about this." She looked at him with suspicion. "You're not going to fire me?" "No," he said, and was surprised by the firmness in his own voice. "In fact, I think we could help each other." After she left to continue her work, Ethan stood in the hallway for long minutes. He couldn't get the image of those green eyes, full of intelligence and dignity, out of his mind, nor the way she had faced the situation with quiet courage. For the first time since he had arrived at the academy, he felt he had found something valuable, not just a brilliant mind, but a person who understood what it meant to fight for something important. As he walked to his office, a small smile formed on his lips. He had a plan, and for the first time in a long time, he felt genuinely excited about the possibilities that lay ahead. The next day, as rumors began to spread about the identity of the mysterious genius, Ethan kept the secret. But in his mind, an idea was already taking shape that could change not only Emily's life, but his own as well. And just as he began to trust, the past returned without warning. The headmaster's office was a space that was both intimidating and fascinating. Books lined mahogany shelves from floor to ceiling, creating a personal library that spoke of years of study and dedication. Framed diplomas decorated the walls: Harvard, MIT, Stanford, names that for Emily had always been unattainable dreams, as distant as the stars. Emily entered with hesitant steps, wiping her sweaty palms on her navy blue uniform. She hadn't been able to sleep after her encounter with Ethan the previous night. She had spent hours trying to imagine what he could want to talk to her about, oscillating between hope and terror. "Please sit down," Ethan said, pointing to a leather chair in front of his desk. He was wearing a white shirt without a tie, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, a casual look that made him seem more approachable than the night before. She sat on the edge of the chair, her back straight and her hands clasped in her lap. Her green eyes quickly scanned the room, memorizing every detail as if it were a museum she could only visit once. "Coffee?" he offered, noticing her nervousness. "No, thank you," she murmured, her voice barely audible. Ethan walked over to the window that overlooked the academy's central courtyard. From there, he could see the students during their break, with their impeccable uniforms and carefree smiles. They came from families who could afford not only their education, but any dream they wanted to pursue. "Emily," he began, turning to face her. "Last night, I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation. Do you really want to study?" "More than anything in the world," she answered without hesitation, and for the first time since she had entered, her voice sounded firm. "What would you study? Mathematics, or engineering, or whatever would let me use numbers to solve real-world problems?" Her eyes lit up as she spoke. "My father always said that math could change the world if you knew how to apply it." Ethan felt something stir in his chest. He had spent years surrounded by people who studied because it was expected, who chose careers based on prestige or money. Here was someone who spoke of mathematics as others speak of a lost love. "And what's stopping you?" The question made Emily look down. "The money. It's always the money. Leo, my brother needs me to work. The bills don't pay themselves." "I understand," he said, approaching his desk. "What would you say if I offered you an alternative?" Emily looked up, hopeful but cautious. "What kind of alternative?" "A full scholarship to study mathematics at the University of Miami," he said, watching her expression transform. "In exchange, you would work part-time here as a math tutor. Your salary would be the same as you earn now, but with better hours." The silence that followed was deafening. Emily stared at him as if he had spoken in another language. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Is this real?" she finally whispered. "Completely real," Ethan confirmed. "I've seen your talent. It would be a waste not to give you the opportunity to develop it." Tears began to roll down Emily's cheeks before she could stop them. Years of sacrifice, of deferred dreams, of feeling invisible, were released in a silent cry that shook her completely. "Why?" she managed to ask between sobs. "Why would you do this for me?" Ethan walked over and handed her a box of tissues. "Because I believe in fairness, and because wasting a talent like yours would be a crime." Emily took a tissue and dried her tears, trying to compose herself. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," he smiled. "Say you'll take this opportunity and show the world what you're made of." "Yes," she whispered, and then louder, "Yes, I accept." Over the next few days, the news that a new tutor would be joining the academy spread among the staff and students. Ethan had been careful in presenting the situation, mentioning that Emily was a talented mathematician who would help students struggling with the subject. However, not everyone received the news with enthusiasm. "Are you sure about this, Ethan?" his older brother Richard asked during a surprise visit to the office. Richard was the vice president of Moore Enterprises and had come to review the academy's numbers. Hiring a cleaning lady as a tutor, don't you think the parents will object? It's an educational decision, Ethan replied firmly. The parents want their children to learn. Emily can teach them. The parents want prestige, Richard retorted. They pay a fortune to send their kids here, not for the girl who cleans the bathrooms to teach them. The words hit Ethan like a slap. It was exactly the kind of mentality he had hoped to leave behind when he left the corporate world. Her ability has nothing to do with her. Previous job, he said, controlling his tone. Her ability isn't the problem, Richard insisted. It's the perception. What will the investors think? The board members? Meanwhile, Emily faced her own challenges. On her first day as a tutor, she arrived at the academy in a navy blue dress she had bought second-hand, her best shoes, which weren't much, and a folder with materials she had prepared all night. The tutoring room was small but bright, with a round table and a whiteboard. When her first students arrived, 3 sophomores who were struggling with algebra, they stared at her with confused expressions. "Are you the new tutor?" asked one of them, a boy named Andrew. "Yes," Emily replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "I'm Emily Johnson." The boys exchanged glances. They recognized the name from the equation scandal, but they had also seen her cleaning the hallways for years. "Aren't you the one who used to clean the bathrooms?" asked another, not maliciously, but with genuine curiosity. "Yes," Emily admitted, feeling her cheeks heat up, "but I'm also a mathematician." For the next hour, she dedicated herself to explaining basic algebra concepts. Gradually, the students began to relax. Her way of explaining was clear, patient, different from the traditional teachers. She didn't make them feel stupid for not understanding something immediately. "Miss Johnson," they said at the end of the session, "can you help us again tomorrow?" Emily's heart swelled with pride. Of course, but not everything was so simple. During the break, as she walked through the hallways she had cleaned for months, she heard whispers as she passed. "That's the one who cleaned the bathrooms. My mum says it's ridiculous. Do they really think she can teach us anything?" The comments followed her like shadows. Some older students, especially those who had humiliated her on that rainy night, looked at her with a mixture of disbelief and contempt. They couldn't accept that someone they had considered inferior was now their equal, at least academically. The situation came to a head one afternoon when Emily was on her way to her tutoring session. In the main hallway, she encountered a group of parents waiting for a meeting. Among them was Mrs. Davenport, an elegant woman in her 50s with jewelry that probably cost more than Emily's annual salary. "Excuse me," Mrs. Davenport said, stopping Emily. "You're the new tutor?" "Yes, ma'am," Emily replied, noticing the barely concealed disdain in the woman's voice. "How interesting," the woman murmured, looking her up and down. "And tell me, where did you study?" Emily felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. "I'm self-taught, ma'am, but I have experience and—" "Self-taught," Mrs. Davenport repeated, as if it were a dirty word. "And the headmaster really believes that someone without a formal education can teach our children?" The other parents had gathered, forming a semicircle around Emily. She felt like a cornered animal, her green eyes shining with humiliation and contained anger. "My results speak for themselves," she managed to say, though her voice trembled. "Your results," scoffed another parent. "My son told me you used to clean these hallways. Frankly, it seems inappropriate." Just then, Ethan appeared in the hallway. He had left his office upon hearing raised voices and immediately understood the situation. Emily's tense posture, the circle of parents around her, the expressions of disdain on their faces. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice calm, but with an authoritative tone that brooked no argument. "Ethan," Mrs. Davenport said, turning to him with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "we were just getting to know your new tutor." "Miss Johnson," he corrected firmly. "And yes, she is excellent at her job." "Darling," Mrs. Davenport continued, lowering her voice as if it were a private conversation, though Emily could hear every word, Don't you think we parents have the right to know the credentials of those who teach our children? Ethan looked directly at Emily. His blue eyes met her green ones, and in that silent moment, something passed between them. A mutual understanding, a recognition that they were on the same side in a battle that was bigger than either of them. Miss Johnson's credentials, Ethan said without taking his eyes off Emily, include the ability to solve equations that our credentialed teachers could not. They include a dedication to learning that I have rarely seen in my career. And most importantly, they include the ability to connect with students in a way that gets real results. Emily felt as if she could fly. No one ever had defended her like that. No one had put their reputation on the line for her. Furthermore, Ethan continued, now addressing all the parents, the results of the students working with her have improved dramatically in just 2 weeks. That's what really matters. The parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. It was hard to argue with concrete results. Of course, Mrs. Davenport muttered. We just wanted to be sure. When the parents dispersed, Ethan and Emily were left alone in the hallway. Her cheeks were red with embarrassment, and her hands were trembling slightly. "Are you okay?" he asked, with a gentleness in his voice that surprised her. "Yes," she lied. "I'm used to it." "You shouldn't be," he said, and there was a contained anger in his words that made her look at him with surprise. "What just happened is not right. It's reality," Emily replied, shrugging. "I'm different from them. I come from a different world." "That doesn't make them better than you," Ethan insisted. "In fact, what you've accomplished is far more impressive than anything they've ever done." Emily looked at him for a long moment. There was something in the intensity of his blue eyes, in the way he had stepped up to defend her, that caused a strange feeling in her chest, a warmth she hadn't felt in years. "Thank you," she whispered, "for defending me." "You don't have to thank me," he replied. "It's the right thing to do." That night, Emily arrived home with a mix of emotions that left her confused. On one hand, the humiliation of the confrontation with the parents still burned in her chest. On the other, the way Ethan had defended her created a warm sensation she didn't know how to interpret. "How was your day?" Leo, her brother, asked as they ate. "Dinner. Complicated," she admitted, "but good. Are the students nice to you?" "Some are," she said, smiling genuinely for the first time that day. "Today, a boy told me that for the first time he understood quadratic equations, that they felt like a puzzle he could finally solve." Leo smiled, noticing how his sister's face lit up when she talked about teaching. "You like it, don't you?" "Teaching? I love it," she admitted. "It's like sharing a beautiful secret. When you see that moment when something clicks in a student's mind, when suddenly everything makes sense to them, it's magical." As she prepared for bed that night, Emily couldn't help but think about Ethan more, about how he had appeared when she needed him most. The firmness in his voice as he defended her, the way his blue eyes had met hers. It was dangerous. He was her boss. He came from a completely different world, and there was a line she shouldn't cross. But there was something about him that defied everything she thought she knew about rich and powerful people. At the same time, in his apartment in Coral Gables, Ethan couldn't concentrate on the reports on his desk. He kept seeing the image of Emily surrounded by those condescending parents, the dignity with which she had faced their veiled insults, the way she had held her head high despite the evident pain in her eyes. He had known many women in his life, models, businesswomen, heiresses, beautiful, intelligent, successful women. But he had never met anyone with Emily's quiet strength, with her ability to find beauty in mathematics, with her unwavering dedication to her brother and her dreams. What he was feeling was dangerous. She worked for him. She came from a completely different world, and any relationship between them would be fraught with complications. But he couldn't deny it. For the first time in years, someone had awakened something in him he thought was lost. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Richard. "We have a problem," his brother said without preamble. "Parents are calling. They want an emergency meeting about your new protégé." Ethan closed his eyes, feeling the weight of what was to come. When? Tomorrow, and Ethan, Dad is going to be there. The line went dead, leaving Ethan in silence. His father, the patriarch of the Moore family, the man who had built an empire and expected his sons to maintain the family prestige at all costs. Tomorrow would be a battle, and he would have to decide what was more important, his family's approval or defending the woman who was beginning to change everything he believed in. What he said before he left will change the course of the entire story. The St. Patrick's Academy boardroom had never hosted such a tense meeting. Around the mahogany table sat the most influential parents of the Academy, along with some members of the board of directors and the patriarch of the Moore family, Mr. Edward Moore, a 65-year-old man, whose mere presence filled the room with unquestionable authority. Ethan arrived exactly on time, dressed in his best navy blue suit and a tie his mother had given him for important occasions. He knew this meeting would define not only Emily's future at the academy, but also his own credibility as headmaster. "Good morning," he greeted, taking a seat at the head of the table. His blue eyes scanned the faces present, reading the expressions of discontent and concern. "Ethan," his father began, without preamble, "we have received multiple complaints about your decision to hire a cleaning staff member as a tutor. The parents are concerned about the prestige of the institution." "I understand your concerns," Ethan replied calmly, "but I believe they are based on prejudice rather than facts." Mrs. Davenport, who had led the confrontation the day before, leaned forward. "It's not prejudice, Ethan. It's standards. We pay a fortune to send our children here because we expect excellence in all aspects. And that is exactly what you're getting," Ethan retorted. "The students working with Miss Johnson have improved their grades by an average of 40% in just 3 weeks. A murmur went through the table. Mr. Moore raised a hand to silence those present. "The numbers are impressive," the patriarch admitted, "but this goes beyond academic results. It's about the institution's image. What will other prestigious schools think? Future investors. They will think we are an institution that values talent over titles," Ethan replied firmly, "that we are smart enough to recognize excellence no matter where it comes from." While this confrontation unfolded in the boardroom, Emily was in the tutoring room, working with a group of juniors who had been struggling with differential calculus. She knew nothing about the meeting taking place just a few feet away, about how her future was being decided at a table where she didn't even have a voice. "Miss Johnson," said Maria, one of her favorite students, "can you explain the chain rule again?" Emily smiled, approaching the whiteboard. This was her favorite part of the day, the moment when complex concepts became simple, when confused faces turned into expressions of understanding. "Imagine you have a function inside another function," she began, drawing diagrams on the board. "It's like a Russian doll. To derive the outer function, we need to multiply by the derivative of the inner function." As she explained, she didn't notice that Ethan had appeared at the door of the room. He had left the meeting during a break, needing to see with his own eyes what he was defending. He watched her move around the room with a natural grace, answering questions, encouraging students who doubted themselves, celebrating every small triumph. Her green eyes shone with a passion he had rarely seen in educators with decades of experience. "I get it now," exclaimed one of the students. "It's like peeling an onion, layer by layer." "Exactly," Emily smiled. "Math is always easier when we find the right analogy." Ethan felt something stir in his chest. This was the reason he had left the corporate world, why he had taken the headmaster position despite his family's objections. To find moments like this, where education truly transformed lives. When the session ended and the students left, Emily finally noticed his presence. "Mr. Moore," she said, surprised. "How long have you been there?" "Long enough to see magic in action," he replied, entering the room. "Is teaching always this natural for you?" Emily blushed slightly. "I love what I do. It helps." Ethan approached the whiteboard, observing the equations and diagrams she had drawn. Her handwriting was clear, her explanations logical and elegant. "Emily," he said, turning to her, "I need to talk to you about something important." The serious tone of his voice made her stomach clench. "Is it about the parents? About what happened yesterday?" "In part," he admitted. "They are pressuring me to reconsider your position here." Emily felt as if the floor had opened up beneath her feet. "I understand," she murmured, looking down. "When do you want me to leave?" "No," he said firmly, stepping closer until he stood before her. "I don't want you to leave. I want you to stay and continue doing exactly what you're doing." She looked up, confused. "But if the parents are pressuring you—" "The parents don't run this school," Ethan interrupted. "I do. And as long as I am the headmaster, you have a place here." The intensity in his blue eyes made Emily feel butterflies in her stomach. There was something in the way he looked at her, in how he had put his career on the line to defend her, that awakened feelings she had long buried. "Why?" she whispered. "Why risk so much for me?" Ethan was silent for a moment, struggling with words he couldn't say, with feelings he shouldn't feel. "Because I believe in justice," he finally said, "and because you deserve to be here as much as anyone else." But there was something more in his eyes, something neither of them dared to name. Just then, the door to the room opened abruptly. Mr. Edward Moore entered, followed by Richard and Mrs. Davenport. Their expressions were stern, determined. "Ethan," his father said, not bothering to greet Emily, "you need to come back to the meeting. We've made a decision." Emily felt invisible again, as if she were a piece of furniture in the room. She recognized this. A feeling. She had lived it for years, but after weeks of feeling valued, of being seen as more than a cleaning lady, it hurt even more. "Dad," Ethan replied, not moving from his spot next to Emily, "any decision involving the staff of this academy must include my approval." "Your approval is being questioned," Mr. Moore retorted coldly. "The board is considering whether you have the necessary judgment to run this institution." The words hit Ethan like a hammer. They weren't just attacking Emily. They were questioning his competence as a headmaster, his right to make decisions. "Emily," he murmured, turning to her, "could you give us a moment?" She nodded, quickly gathering her materials. As she left the room, she heard Mr. Moore's voice rise. "You've risked your entire career for a girl who cleaned toilets, Ethan. Is this what we taught you?" Emily hurried away, tears burning her eyes. She didn't want to hear any more, couldn't bear to be the cause of problems for the only man who had believed in her. She reached the nearest restroom and locked herself in one of the stalls, letting the tears flow freely. She had allowed herself to dream, had allowed herself to believe she could belong in that world. But the reality was, she would always be the cleaning lady who had dared to aspire to more. Meanwhile, in the room, the confrontation continued. "She's not just a girl who cleaned toilets," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. "She is one of the most brilliant minds I have ever met. She is someone who has overcome obstacles none of us can even imagine. She is exactly the kind of person we should be celebrating, not discriminating against." "She's a distraction," insisted Mrs. Davenport. "The other students are talking. Their parents are worried." "The students are learning," Ethan retorted. "Their grades speak for themselves." Mr. Moore watched his son for a long moment. There was something in the passion with which Ethan defended this woman that felt familiar. He had seen it before, years ago, when Ethan had announced he would leave the family business to dedicate himself to education. "Ethan," he finally said, his voice softer but just as firm, "is this about education, or is it about something more?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Ethan felt as if his father could read his heart, see the feelings he was just beginning to understand himself. "It's about doing the right thing," he replied, but his voice sounded less convincing than before. "Then you'll have no problem transferring her to another institution," Mr. Moore said, "with an excellent recommendation, of course, and a full scholarship to any university she chooses." Ethan froze. The offer was generous, more than Emily could have ever dreamed of, but it also meant sending her away from him, losing her forever. "She's fine here," he said weakly. "No," his father replied. "Here, she is causing problems. For her, for you, for the entire institution. If you truly care about her well-being, you'll let her go." Richard stepped closer to his younger brother. "Ethan, be reasonable. This can be resolved without anyone getting hurt. She gets the education she wants, you keep your position, and everyone wins." Ethan closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. He knew his family was right in practical terms. Keeping Emily at the academy would only bring more problems, more confrontations, more pressure. But he also knew that sending her away would mean losing something that was just beginning to blossom between them. Something he hadn't even admitted to himself, but that had become fundamental to his happiness. "I need time to think," he finally said. "You have until tomorrow," Mr. Moore replied. "After that, we'll make the decision for you." When they left, Ethan was alone in the room. He walked to the whiteboard where Emily had been teaching minutes before, touching the equations she had written with a gentleness that seemed out of place in his strong hands. For the first time in his life, he had to choose between his family and what his heart told him was right. And he wasn't sure he had the courage to make the choice he knew he had to make. That afternoon, he found Emily in the library, sitting at a table in the back, surrounded by math books. Her eyes were red, but her posture was straight, dignified. She was studying as if nothing had happened, as if her world hadn't been turned upside down that morning. "Emily," he said softly, approaching the table. She looked up, and in her green eyes he saw a mixture of hope and resignation that broke his heart. "Have you made your decision?" she asked. Ethan sat across from her, taking her hands in his. The contact sent an electric shock through both their arms. "Emily," he began, his voice filled with emotion, "what I'm about to tell you is going to change everything between us." Emily's hands trembled in Ethan's. The touch was warm, comforting, but also dangerous. In the intimacy of the library, surrounded by the silence of books, the outside world seemed to disappear. "What's going to change?" she whispered, though a part of her already knew. She had seen something in his blue eyes over the past few weeks, something that mirrored the feelings she had tried to ignore. Ethan took a deep breath, struggling with words he had rehearsed 1,000 times in his mind, but that now felt inadequate. "Emily, he began, but the words got stuck in his throat. "Since the night I met you, since I saw your solution on the board, something changed in me." Her green eyes filled with unshed tears. "Ethan, you can't—" "Let me finish," he interrupted gently. "These last few days have been the clearest of my life. Watching you teach, watching you fight for your dreams with such dignity, watching you face humiliation without losing your essence. It has taught me what it truly means to be brave. But your family, your position," she murmured, trying to pull her hands away. "My family is asking me to send you away," he said, holding her hands firmly, "to transfer you to another institution with a full scholarship. They say it's for the best." Emily's heart stopped. It was what she had expected, but it still hurt to hear it. "I understand," she murmured, looking down. "I suppose it's the sensible thing to do." "Is it?" Ethan asked, lifting her chin with a finger so she would look him in the eyes. "Is it sensible to push away the only person who has made me feel like what I do matters? Is it sensible to give up the chance of—" "Of what?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Of loving you," he said finally, the words tumbling out like a confession torn from the depths of his soul. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily stared at him as if she couldn't believe what she had heard. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. "Ethan," she finally managed to say, "we're from different worlds. This can't work." "Why not?" he asked, moving closer. "Because you have less money? Because you didn't go to Harvard? Because you worked cleaning floors?" "Because all of that matters," she replied, tears finally rolling down her cheeks. "Your family made that very clear. Your future, your career, everything is at risk because of me. My future is worth nothing if you're not a part of it," Ethan said, taking her face in his hands. "Emily, these last few days, I've understood something I didn't know before. I've known success, money, prestige, but with you, I've known something more important, real happiness. Before she could respond, Ethan leaned in and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, full of all the tenderness and passion he had been holding back for weeks. Emily tensed for a moment, fighting her own feelings, but then she melted into his arms. When they parted, they were both breathing heavily. "You can't ask me to ruin your life," she whispered against his lips. "You're not ruining anything," he replied. "You're giving everything meaning." But reality struck them when they heard footsteps approaching down the hall. They separated quickly, trying to compose themselves. A group of students entered the library, breaking the intimate bubble that had surrounded them. "We need to talk," Ethan said. "But not here. Could you meet me tonight at the Bayside Grind downtown at 8? Emily nodded, still stunned by everything that had happened. "Ethan, tonight," he repeated, standing up. "I'm going to tell you something I should have told you from the beginning, something that changes everything." That afternoon, Emily arrived home in a state of complete emotional confusion. Her feelings for Ethan had been growing for weeks, but she had fought against them for practical reasons. Now that he had confessed to feeling the same, everything had become more complicated. "Emmy," said Leo, her brother, noticing her distant expression. "Are you okay?" "Just tired," she lied, but moved to hug him. This 14-year-old boy was her reason for living, the person for whom she had sacrificed everything. Any decision she made would directly affect him. "How are things at the academy?" he asked. "Are the rich kids still giving you a hard time?" Emily smiled sadly. "Some are, but others are starting to understand that we're all the same when it comes to learning." "I'm proud of you, Emmy," Leo said, snuggling next to her on the small couch. "Dad would be proud of what you've achieved." Her brother's words hit her like a punch. Her father had dreamed that she would study, that she would use her talent for mathematics to build a better life. But he had also taught them about dignity, about not letting others treat them as inferior. What would he say about her situation with Ethan? Would he approve of a relationship that could be seen as an exchange of favors? Or would he understand that the feelings were real, regardless of the circumstances? At 8 o'clock sharp, Emily found herself in front of the Bayside Grind, a trendy spot in Miami's bustling downtown. The modern building was lit with warm, inviting lights that created a romantic atmosphere. Despite the beauty of the place, she felt completely out of place in her simple dress and worn shoes. Ethan was already waiting for her at a table in the back, dressed casually in jeans and a white shirt. When he saw her enter, he stood up and smiled at her with a tenderness that made her momentarily forget all her worries. "Thanks for coming," he said, helping her with her chair. "I wasn't sure if I should," she admitted, sitting down. They ordered coffee and a slice of cake to share, although neither of them seemed hungry. For the first few minutes, they talked about trivial things, as if both were postponing the real conversation. "Emily," Ethan said finally, taking her hands across the table, "I told you I had something important to tell you, something I should have told you from the beginning." She nodded, preparing for the worst. "When I met you that night in the hallway, when I saw your solution on the board, it wasn't the first time I had heard of you," he began, and Emily felt the blood freeze in her veins. "What do you mean?" she asked in a trembling voice. Ethan took a deep breath. "Your father, Robert Johnson, was my math teacher when I was 15. Emily's world came to a complete stop. "What?" she whispered, unable to process what she had just heard. "I didn't always go to private schools," Ethan continued, his blue eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "When I was 15, I went through a rebellious phase. My parents pulled me out of private school and sent me to a public school as punishment, Westwood Technical High, in your neighborhood." Emily immediately recognized the name. It was the school where her father had worked for the last years of his life. "Mr. Johnson was different from everyone else," Ethan went on. "He didn't care that I was the son of a wealthy family. He treated me the same as all the other students. When he saw I had a knack for math, he would stay after class to teach me advanced concepts." "My father never told me about you," Emily murmured, though she began to remember vague mentions of a special student he had had. "I was Ethan from Coral Gables back then," he smiled sadly. "I lied about my real last name because I didn't want to be treated differently. Your father knew me as Ethan Smith." Suddenly, it all made sense in Emily's mind. Her father had often mentioned a boy named Ethan Smith, a brilliant student who had arrived at the school mid-year and had shown an exceptional talent for mathematics. "He talked about you," she whispered, tears starting to roll down her cheeks. "He said you had a special gift, that you could go far if you set your mind to it." "Your father changed my life," Ethan said, his voice cracking with emotion. "He taught me that math was beautiful, yes, but he also taught me about humility, about working hard, about treating everyone with respect regardless of where they came from." Emily brought her hands to her face, trying to process the magnitude of what she was hearing. "Is that why you helped me? Because of my father?" "At first, yes," Ethan admitted. "When I found out who you were, I felt I owed his memory. But Emily, I swear that what I feel for you has nothing to do with that. You are brilliant, you are strong, you are beautiful in your own right." "How can I be sure?" she asked, her voice full of pain. "How do I know I'm not just your way of repaying a debt to a dead man?" Ethan got up from his chair and knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. "Because if it were just for that, I wouldn't have risked my career defending you in front of my family. I wouldn't have challenged the most powerful parents at the academy, and I definitely wouldn't be here confessing that I've fallen in love with you." The other customers in the cafe began to stare, but neither of them cared. In that moment, it was just the two of them, and the truth that had finally come to light. "Your father taught me something else," Ethan continued, not letting go of her hands. "He taught me that true love knows no social boundaries. He married your mother, even though their families objected. He told me that real love is what makes you want to be a better person, not what changes you to please others." Emily remembered the stories her father used to tell her about how he met her mother, how they had fought against family expectations to be together. "He always said that Mom made him a better man," she murmured. "You make me a better man, Emily," Ethan said, bringing her hands to his lips to kiss them gently. "These last few months have been the most authentic of my life. With you, I remembered why I wanted to go into education, why I left the family business." "But your family," she began. "My family will have to understand," he interrupted her, "because I'm not going to lose you. Tomorrow, I will face the board. I will fight for your position at the academy, and if necessary, I will resign from my position as headmaster." "You can't do that," Emily protested. "Your career, your dreams." "My dreams include a life with you," he said firmly. "And if I have to start over somewhere else, I will, but I won't let them take you away from me." Emily looked at him through her tears. She saw in his blue eyes the same determination she had seen in her father's years ago, when he fought to give her the best possible education, despite their financial limitations. "Ethan," she whispered, releasing one of her hands to caress his face. "I've fallen in love with you, too." He closed his eyes at the touch of her hand, as if he had been waiting for those words his whole life. "Really? For weeks," she admitted. "But I was scared of not being enough for you, scared of ruining your life." "You're not ruining anything," he said, standing up to kiss her again. "You complete everything." They spent the next 2 hours talking, sharing stories about their lives, their dreams, their fears. Ethan told her about the pressure of carrying the Moore name, about how he had fought for years to prove he was more than a privileged heir. Emily told him about the nights she had spent studying while her brother slept, about her dreams of one day teaching at a university. When they finally left the cafe, the streets of downtown Miami were illuminated by the city lights. They walked, hand in hand, knowing that the next day they would have to face the approaching storm. "What's going to happen tomorrow?" Emily asked, as they waited for the bus that would take her home. "Tomorrow, I'm going to fight for us," Ethan replied, kissing her forehead. "I'm going to show the board that you are valuable not just as a tutor, but as a person. And I'm going to tell my family that I've made my decision." What if it doesn't work? What if they make you choose between your career and me? Ethan looked her directly in the eyes. I've already chosen, he said simply. When the bus arrived, Ethan didn't want to let her go. I love you, he said, the words coming out naturally for the first time. I love you too, she replied, getting on the bus with her heart full of a mixture of happiness and terror. As the bus pulled away, Emily pressed her face against the window, watching Ethan grow smaller in the distance. She had found love, but she had also discovered a secret that changed her entire perception of their relationship. Could she trust that Ethan's feelings were real, or would she always wonder if she was just the daughter of the teacher who had marked his life? When she got home, she found her brother waiting up for her. Emmy, he said, looking at her with concern. Are you okay? You look strange. I'm fine, she lied, sitting next to him. It's just been a complicated day. Want to talk about it? Emily looked at him, this brother who was more like a son, who depended on her for everything. Leo, she said finally, what would you do if you had to choose between what you want and what's best for the people you love? The boy looked at her with a seriousness that seemed older than his 14 years. Dad always said that the hard decisions are the ones that define who we really are, he replied. I think you'd do the right thing, Emmy. You always do. That night, Emily lay awake until dawn, staring out the window of her small room. In a few hours, Ethan would face the Academy's board of directors. In a few hours, her future would be decided. But for the first time in her life, she didn't feel completely alone facing a battle. She had someone who was willing to fight alongside her, someone who had put his career on the line to defend her. The secret had been revealed, and with it, the understanding that her connection with Ethan was deeper and more complex than she had imagined. Now, all that was left was to wait and see if that love would be enough to overcome all the forces aligned against them. The secret will finally be revealed, and nothing will ever be the same again. The dawn of the most important day of their lives found Ethan in his office, reviewing for the last time the presentation he would make before the board of directors. He had spent the night preparing arguments, compiling evidence of Emily's academic success, building his case with the same meticulousness he had used years ago in financial negotiations. But this time, it wasn't just about numbers or strategies. It was about the woman who had changed his perspective on everything he thought was important in life. At 9 o'clock sharp, the boardroom filled up again. This time, in addition to the board and his family, some of the most influential parents from the academy were present. Mrs. Davenport had managed to gather a small crowd, determined to show that the school community rejected Emily's continued presence. Ethan entered, dressed in his best suit, carrying a folder with documents and a determination he had inherited from generations of successful businessmen. But today, he wasn't fighting for money or power. He was fighting for love. Good morning, he greeted, taking his place at the head of the table. His blue eyes scanned the faces present, reading the expressions of discontent and curiosity. Ethan, his father began, we hope you have reconsidered your position overnight. I have, he replied calmly, and my position is firmer than ever. A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. They had expected him to yield under pressure. Before you make any decision, Ethan continued, I want to present you with some facts. He activated the projector and began his presentation. The first few slides showed the grades of the students who had worked with Emily over the past month. The numbers were undeniable. Average improvements of 40% in math, 95% student satisfaction, positive comments from other teachers about the change in attitude towards the subject. These are concrete results, Ethan said. Not opinions, not perceptions, measurable facts. Mrs. Davenport shifted uncomfortably in her seat. The numbers are impressive, but there is something more important than numbers, Ethan interrupted her. And that is the transformation this woman has achieved not only in the students, but in the entire educational community. He moved to the next slide, which showed written testimonials from students. Ethan began to read some of them aloud. I used to hate math, but Miss Johnson taught me that it's like solving fun mysteries. I never thought I could understand calculus, but now I want to study engineering like her. Miss Johnson teaches us that where you come from doesn't matter as much as where you want to go. The last testimonial made several board members exchange significant glances. Ethan had carefully chosen those words because he knew they would strike at the heart of what education represented. "Gentlemen," Ethan said, closing the presentation and addressing the board directly, "this institution can take two paths. It can continue to be a place where privilege determines value, or it can become a place where talent and dedication are the only things that matter." Mr. Moore leaned forward. "Ethan, no one is questioning Miss Johnson's talent, but prestigious educational institutions operate under certain social parameters." "Social parameters?" Ethan repeated, his voice filling with an emotion he had been holding back. "Dad, do you know how I really learned to value education?" The question took Mr. Moore by surprise. "At Harvard, I suppose." "No," Ethan replied firmly. "At a public school in the Westwood neighborhood, with a teacher named Robert Johnson." The silence that followed was absolute. Everyone present knew the story of Ethan's rebellious youth, but they had never heard the specific details. "Mr. Johnson taught me that math doesn't distinguish between rich and poor," Ethan continued. "He taught me that true education is what transforms lives, regardless of what family you come from." He turned to his father, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "That man changed my life, Dad. He taught me values that you, with all your money and privilege, could never teach me. And now his daughter is here, carrying on his legacy, and you want to push her away because of social prejudice." The revelation landed like a bombshell in the room. Mr. Moore looked at his son with a mixture of surprise and understanding he hadn't shown before. "Emily Johnson is not here out of charity," Ethan declared, his voice resonating with conviction. "She is here because she is exactly what this institution needs to remember its true purpose." At that moment, the door to the room opened silently. Emily entered, dressed in the same navy blue dress she had worn on her first day as a tutor, but with a dignity in her posture that commanded respect. "Excuse the interruption," she said in a clear, firm voice, "but I believe I have the right to participate in a meeting that decides my future." Ethan looked at her with surprise and admiration. They hadn't planned for her to come, but her presence completely transformed the dynamic of the room. "Miss Johnson," said Mrs. Davenport, clearly uncomfortable, "this is a board of directors meeting." "And I am the topic of discussion," Emily replied, approaching the table. "For weeks you have talked about me as if I were an object, a problem to be solved. But I am a person, and I deserve to have a voice in this." She stood next to Ethan, and he felt a strength radiating from her presence. This was the woman he had fallen in love with. Brave, intelligent, unbreakable. "I understand your concerns," Emily began, addressing the board directly. "I understand that my presence here challenges your expectations of how things should be. But let me tell you something you may not know." She walked to the whiteboard in the room and picked up a marker. With confident movements, she began to write a complex equation. "This," she said, "is the equation that describes the optimal distribution of educational resources in elite institutions. I solved it last night." She worked for the next 5 minutes, developing the solution step by step. Her explanation was clear, elegant, brilliant. When she finished, she turned to the board. "For years, this institution has operated under the premise that exclusivity guarantees quality. But this equation proves the opposite. It shows that a diversity of talents and perspectives exponentially improves educational outcomes." Mr. Moore had leaned forward, completely absorbed in the explanation. As a businessman, he recognized a brilliant mind when he saw one. "Miss Johnson," he said finally, "that is an impressive demonstration." "Thank you," she replied, "but I'm not here to impress you. I'm here to ask you to reconsider what educational excellence truly means." She moved closer to the table, her green eyes shining with a passion that was impossible to ignore. I come from a world where education is a luxury not everyone can afford. I've seen talent wasted for lack of opportunity, brilliant minds wither for lack of recognition, but I've also seen what happens when someone believes in you. She looked at Ethan, and in that exchange of glances, everyone in the room could see the deep connection that existed between them. Ethan gave me a chance when no one else would have, Emily continued. Not because he felt sorry for me, but because he recognized something valuable. And that is exactly what a true educator does. She addressed Mr. Moore specifically. Mr. Moore, your son told me about my father, about how a public school teacher changed his perspective on education. My father believed that knowledge was the great equalizer, that math knew no social boundaries. Mr. Moore nodded slowly, remembering the stories Ethan had told him years ago about that special teacher. If you drive Ethan away for defending me, Emily continued, you will be losing the most committed headmaster you've ever had. And if you push me away, you will be sending the message that talent only matters if it comes in the right package. The room fell into a reflective silence. Emily had made her case not with pleas or defenses, but with facts, dignity, and a clear vision of what education could be. But there's something more you should know, Emily said, and Ethan felt his heart race. Over these past few weeks, Ethan and I have developed feelings for each other. A murmur of surprise swept the room. Mrs. Davenport visibly tensed. We know this complicates things, Emily continued, taking Ethan's hand. We know there will be those who see this as inappropriate, as a confirmation of their prejudices about my motivations for being here. Ethan squeezed her hand, giving her the strength to continue. But we also know that true love, mutual respect, and shared values transcend social differences. My father taught me that, and if you decide there is no place for us in this institution, we will accept it. But we will not give up on what we have found. Mr. Moore looked at his son, seeing in his eyes a determination he recognized because he had inherited it from him. Then he looked at Emily, this young woman who had walked into the room like a quiet storm and challenged all his perceptions. Ethan, he said finally, are you willing to risk your career for this woman? I'm not risking my career, Ethan replied firmly. I'm defining what kind of educator I want to be. And yes, I am willing to sacrifice anything for the love of my life. Ethan's public confession sent shockwaves through the room. He had laid his cards on the table in the most definitive way possible. Mr. Moore leaned back in his chair, processing everything he had heard. For long minutes, he studied the couple standing before him. He saw in his son a conviction he hadn't seen since he decided to leave the family business. He saw in Emily a strength and dignity that reminded him of his own wife when he had met her decades ago. Members of the board, he said finally, addressing the others, I propose we vote, but first I want to say something. He stood up, walking over to Ethan and Emily. For years I have built empires based on numbers, on profits, on prestige, but I forgot something fundamental. The best businesses, the best institutions are built on solid values and exceptional people. He looked directly at Emily. Miss Johnson, you have demonstrated today that you have exactly what this institution needs. Not just knowledge, but character. He turned to his son. And you, Ethan, have shown that you are the leader I hoped you would be. Someone willing to fight for what is right, no matter the personal cost. The vote that followed was not unanimous, but it was decisive. By a majority of 6-3, the board voted to keep Emily in her position as tutor and to fully support Ethan's leadership as headmaster. Mrs. Davenport and a few other parents left, clearly disgruntled, but Mr. Moore stayed. He approached Emily and extended his hand. Welcome to the family, he said simply. That afternoon, as the sun set over Miami, Ethan and Emily walked through the academy's central courtyard. The students staying for extracurricular activities greeted them naturally, as if they had always belonged together in that place. Can you believe it really happened? Emily asked, still processing the day's events. I believe your father would be proud, Ethan replied. stopping under the royal poinciana tree that dominated the center of the courtyard. "Of what you've achieved, of the woman you've become. I think he would be proud of you too," she said, moving closer, "for standing up for what's right, for fighting for us." Ethan wrapped his arms around her, looking into her eyes. "Emily Johnson, would you like to build a future with me? Would you help me transform this institution into something we can be truly proud of?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation, "but only if you promise me something. Anything. Promise that we'll always remember where we came from, that we'll always fight for the students who need a chance, no matter their background." "I promise," he said, sealing his commitment with a kiss that tasted of new beginnings. 3 months later, St. Patrick's Academy announced a new full scholarship program for talented students from public schools. The program would be called the Robert Johnson Scholarship, in honor of the teacher who had inspired both Ethan and his daughter. Emily had been officially hired as a math teacher, and her innovative methods were being adopted by other institutions. Ethan had received national recognition for his inclusive approach to private education, but more important than any professional recognition was what they had built together. A relationship based on mutual respect, shared values, and a love that had grown from admiration into a lifelong partnership. One afternoon, while Emily was teaching advanced calculus to a mixed group of students, some from wealthy families, others beneficiaries of the new scholarships, Ethan watched her from the classroom door. He saw how she treated each student with the same dedication, how she turned complex concepts into moments of discovery. In that moment, he knew with absolute certainty that he had made the right decision. He had not only found the love of his life, he had found his partner in the mission to transform lives through education. That night, during dinner in their new apartment, a middle ground between Ethan's family home in Coral Gables and Emily's apartment in Westwood, they toasted to the future they had built together. "To the equations that didn't seem to have a solution," Ethan said, raising his glass, "and to discovering that love always finds a way," Emily replied, clinking her glass against his. Outside, the city of Miami glittered with the lights of millions of dreams. Some would be fulfilled, others would be transformed, but all were valid. And in a small middle-class apartment, 2 people who had defied social expectations were building a love that proved that the best equations in life are the ones you solve with your heart. Emily's brother, now a scholarship student at the same academy where she taught, had written in his journal that afternoon, "Today I understood what Dad meant when he said that true love was what made you grow." Emily and Ethan didn't just find each other, they helped each other become the best versions of themselves. And in the words of a teenager, the essence of a story that had begun with pain, passed through resistance, and blossomed into a love that transformed not only the lives of those who lived it, but of all who were fortunate enough to witness it, was summarized. This story isn't just about them. It could also be about you. Did you like this love story that shows dreams can come true when someone believes in you? Give this a like if you believe in the transformative power of true love. Comment which city you're following from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that touch the soul. Suggest what kind of story you'd like to hear next time.